From Acres USA, you are listening to the Acres USA podcast, a conversational podcast where we'll explore sustainable farming, regenerative practices, and the latest innovations in eco-agriculture with some of your favorite farmers and ranchers. I'm your host, Taylor Henry, the owner and CEO of Acres USA. Welcome to the Acres USA podcast. All right, today my guest is Mollie Engelhart, who is a chef, mother, regenerative rancher, and author of Debunked By Nature, our new book that we've published with Acres USA. Mollie went from running 5 vegan restaurants in Los Angeles to stewarding land and raising animals at Sovereignty Ranch in Texas. In her new book, Mollie shares the raw story of how nature transformed her views on food, politics, motherhood, and our place in the world. So, thank you for joining us, Mollie. Nice to have you on again on the podcast.
Thanks for having me. A lot's happened. Last time I came on the podcast, I was just a random person, and now you guys are publishing my book. So,
yeah, I think the podcast is what led us to talking about the book, wasn't it?
yes, after the podcast, You asked me if I was interested, and that's what led to this partnership. So, you never know. One podcast leads to one thing, to another, to another. There's in life, one little pebble can have a ripple effect so much bigger than we could know.
Yeah. So I'll say you have, maybe this is a good thing to talk about with your background, because you have some of the most impressive reviews of the book that I've ever had. So Joel Salatin wrote the foreword, and then you have people like J.P. Sears, who's a comedian, Misha Tate, who's obviously really famous. I mean, John Sally, Woody Harrelson.
Well, you told me
where did you make all these? Where's John Sally come into this? Because that was one that I was surprised to see.
John Sally and me have been friends, I would say, 20 years. He's a vegan. He still is a vegan, and we don't agree on my current view of politics, and his current view of politics are different. But he started being my friend. I was a poet. I don't know if people know this about me. Like back in the day, I was on HBO Def Poetry with Russell Simmons. I toured around the country. I opened for The Roots. I opened for Michael Franti, doing poetry. And you can look up, I swore a lot more back then, and I was less godly than I am now, but you can Google Mollie Engelhart and find old school clips of me doing poetry. But I used to go to the Poetry Lounge, which is a poetry spot in Los Angeles, every Tuesday night. And John Sally used to be there. And he's gone through all different kinds of phases, but he's always eaten at our restaurant. He's always been really interested in food. And we've talked multiple times about trying to start produce businesses or trying to start a farm. He's very interested in food, but it never came to fruition. But we've been friends, and his phone number's in my contact list. And literally, when you told me to get some blurbs, I was like, okay, who do I have in my contact list? And I just started sending it out to people, the review copy of the book, digitally, and was an invitation for them to write a review of the book, even if my politics or my transformation didn't align with their views in the world. And so John Sally is an NBA player and a vegan and lives in Los Angeles, and we don't have a lot in common, but we have respect and love for each other. And I think that is important, that we maintain friendships even if we have different ideas. And with COVID, that was really hard. A lot of friends kind of disconnected from me because of my views on vaccines. And then, with losing my businesses later in life and not having as much money, I got really present to people that I thought were in my life because they loved me and maybe they did work for me, but I thought we were like family. And I realized this is actually just a transactional relationship. But there has been friendships over the years that no matter what my politics were or what my financial situation has been, that they were there. And so John is one of those friends that through all different, having a recording studio, I knew him, being at the Poetry Lounge, I knew him, and then having a vegan restaurant, I've known him. And now as a farmer, I know him. So it's really, he's been my friend through all these different times.
Yeah, I think your story some people might be, if I think that's kind of the issue though. Like if you get offended by like the politics and some of the other things that obviously you feel very strongly about, the base core of the story is pretty easy to resonate with everybody. Like everybody knows something is going on that maybe isn't quite up to standard, like with our food and just the way that things have been working, whether you're a Democrat or Republican. I think everybody's kind of at that realization. That's what's impressive, because I'm sure Woody Harrelson's probably in the same standpoint as John Sally, where they might cringe a little bit at some of the things you say, but the base core story is, anyone can resonate with.
I love Woody. I've known him since I was like 13 years old. He's like an uncle to me, and his wife is best friends with my mom's twin sister. And he was my first investor. Like he really believed in me and helped me open my second restaurant. He was the first person I ever took money from in an investment way. And he definitely, yeah, doesn't see eye to eye on the politics, but I think that he knows, just like we all know, that something is off and we're not in alignment with nature anymore. And we've got ourselves disconnected in a way that doesn't make sense. And I think that's why he chose to write that. And he did go back and forth on whether he was going to write a blurb or not. And I think he masterfully doesn't say anything specific about my views in the book, but just that he has this tremendous love and respect for my commitment to the truth. And so I think he navigated that well, knowing what he believes and I believe is different. But he's always been willing to push the envelope. As a vegan, he narrated both Kiss the Ground and Common Ground films that my brother produced. And because I think that must have been hard for him to navigate these stories about how animal agriculture is important for the environment. But I think that he cares about the earth more than he cares about being right and his specific views. And so all these people have come into my life in different ways, and I've maintained these friendships. Misha Tate just heard about me through all the press that happened when I switched my restaurants to regenerative, and she reached out, and the same with Maggie Q, who's also a famous actress. They reached out when I switched my restaurants and just said, like, thank you for your bravery. Thank you for changing your mind publicly. It's something we don't really do anymore in our culture, is like be willing to say, I believed this thing and now I believe something different. And so those people on the back of the book or in the front of the book are people from all different eras of my life. John Sally and Woody, the longest part of my life, and others are more recent. But I'm grateful for all the support that I got, and even Joel. At first, I wasn't really like that excited about the idea of Joel writing the foreword. You guys had offered to ask him, and I thought he might just say yes because we're on the same publisher, and I wanted someone. And other people are like, oh, you got to just write the foreword and send it to someone and get them to sign off on it. You got to write the blurbs and get people to sign off on it. And I was like, not interested in doing that. I wanted people's authentic endorsement or people's authentic forward. And so when we reached out to Joel, Paul reached out to Joel for a blurb, he literally asked, like, I love this book. I want, and then of course I wanted him. I mean, he's a legend. I really wanted him to write it, but I wanted him to write it because he was inspired to do so. And I was so grateful for that. And we had not met in person until last week. We've been talking. We both write for Epoch Times as well sometimes. And we've had like these different kind of, layers where we're close in proximity or we've talked on email, but we just met the first time in person in Washington, D.C. last week at this epic conference that we did for food and soil health, and he just crushed it. I put on my Instagram, you can watch his last closing remarks, and he's just the legend that he always is, asking government to get out of the way and stop enslaving the food system and enslaving the farmer and let us be free to sell food to our neighbors. And that is just so necessary. I think his voice in the world is so necessary when we've lost 170,000 farms since 2017. That's such a huge number, and we can't continue to go down that trajectory. Losing 1 in 15 farms in 8 years is just catastrophic to the rural communities, to the economy, and to our food sovereignty and the health of our food. And so I'm so honored that he wrote the foreword, because he's just a legend, really fighting for farmers' rights for longer than I've been a farmer.
Yeah, yeah, I know he's an important voice. He's moved this movement ahead by a lot. And he has the important lessons about the economics too that I think all farmers need right now. But you talk about the direction that we're heading in agriculture and wanting to sell to your neighbor and be creative in the ways that you structure a business. Do you want to talk a little bit about what you obviously go from the vegan restaurants in LA, and then you guys buy a ranch in Texas. What is your version of making it work in 2025 as a farmer and mother and everything else that you do?
Well, like so many other farmers, I have an off farm job. I write for Epoch Times, and then we have multiple enterprises on the ranch. So we have a restaurant on the ranch. It's open Thursday through Sunday, and hopefully we'll get to be open Tuesday through Sunday. But labor and the economics of people coming, and we're still growing. And then we have a farm store that's open every day, and we have a herd share. And then, as well as all of that, we do, boxes, like you can buy a meat box. We have a CSA that we deliver on Tuesdays, and we don't do farmers markets. We have found that farmers markets are a waste of labor, at least here where we are. In California, I used to do pretty good numbers at farmers markets, and it was economically worth it. Here, sometimes we only will do $300 at a farmer's market. And when you think about all the produce that goes bad on the table, all the labor to pack everything up, pack it back, ice chest for the meat, da, 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 and then you only sell $300. We pre-order everything on Tuesdays. You can pre-order, and we deliver to coffee shops, to hair salon, to different towns. Different people have taken it on. So it's a coffee shop one place, it's a farmer's market one place, it's a salon one place, it's someone's porch. And they pre-order all these things, and then we just drop it off. So I already know in the morning, and some weeks are less and some weeks are more. This last week was only like $1,000. But in the case that it was only $1,000, me and my husband made the deliveries. Like, there's no reason to pay a driver and da 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 da. So we go to Costco on Tuesdays anyway to get ready for the weekend in the restaurant. Anything that we need to buy, um, organic, add in things that are not things we're growing or getting from Azure Standard. So Tuesday, I just, instead of paying someone, me and my husband made those 4 drops, and it doesn't take but 2 hour loop. And we did our Costco run and took the kids out to Thai food and made it a family thing. So we've tried to set ourselves up to not, and then some weeks it's a lot and we need 2 drivers. So maybe we go one place and someone else goes the other place. But it really depends on how those orders are. But we know in the morning what we've sold. We don't have to harvest anything we haven't sold. And that really works for us. And we give the people that have the space some free produce or some free meat as part of the deal. And so obviously we have a lot of different revenue streams on the farm. And we also do retreats and Airbnb. And we have pork, lamb, goat, and beef herds. So not huge herds, like 100 head of hog, about 35 cows, and probably 35 goats and 35 sheep. Oh, no, less sheep, maybe 20 sheep. And they all move every day. Just moving, moving, moving. So those are all little kind of like micro incomes. And I honestly think we have too many endeavors right now, but because we were new to the area and we didn't know what was going to stick, we've kind of put a lot out there, and we'll have to narrow it as we see this endeavor is coming up with more money. Restaurant is, and the farm store are like our biggest, followed by events and Airbnb. So we'll see as things, go, how do we narrow what our different entrepreneurial things are.
Yeah.
And we'd like to add chicken and rabbits, but my husband says not until we take away something else because he says that I'm great at adding things to the plate, but I'm not.
Yeah, I think that's important. When people get into this, everyone gets excited and wants to add everything. But I think it's really important to find that lane, those few things. I mean, still be diversified in some ways, but find the main things that are going to make you money. And obviously, with your chef background, the restaurant's a easy one for you. But everyone usually has some sort of background that they can leverage.
The
How has the
other thing,
restaurant?
I think that when people get
Go
into
ahead.
stuff as farmers, we want to grow everything. And you read something, and this guy's making microgreens. He's making $3,000 a week on his microgreens or whatever. And I like to look at like what is shelf stable and then what has the longest shelf life. And I come from a background of chef, but I also was a citrus and avocado farmer in California. And citrus and avocados have long, you don't think of avocados having a long shelf life, but they don't even ripen from picking to the tree to getting even kind of ripe is like 30 to 40 days. And then there's ways that you can slow or speed that up. But when you're thinking about what to grow, I think it's important that you think about the shelf stability of stuff because people will go all in on peaches and you have this very short window to monetize those peaches. And if something goes wrong, and if you do to go all in on peaches, then you might want to think of some shelf stable products to go along with it, like jam or vinegar. We make vinegar, we make grape vinegar, we make peach vinegar and persimmons vinegar. And vinegar sells for almost the same price as wine, like a high end vinegar that's raw that you've made. I think farmers should consider this because there's so much waste that happens and we have so many products that aren't shelf stable. And then when you have a bunch of 250-gallon totes of vinegar, you also then get creative. Like, oh, I have all these chilies. Let me make hot sauce, again, shelf stable. And so I just want to invite farmers to think of things. And if you don't have a permit, you can dry chilies and or smoke them for things that don't need permits. Like, and different states are different. But I just think that it's really important to think about what is going to be shelf stable and what is going to be long lasting. We primarily grow like on large scale masa cord, popcorn, and sesame seeds, and those all go into the restaurant and go into shelf stable products and can sit in barrels. We nitri- uh, put nitrogen or put ox CO2 so that kills any bugs that are in there, and then let it sit in these big barrels or big containers, and we can sell popcorn all year round. And so I think it's important when we're new and we're wanting to be having all these things, you want this abundant table with all this lettuce and stuff. Lettuce, there's no way to make lettuce shelf stable. So I think it's nice to have a little lettuce, but I think it's more important to be able to capture your energy, capture your effort into something that you can sell all year. And I don't know if every farmer is talking about that, but I think it's a really important thing to think about when you're deciding what to grow.
Hey, eco farmers. This is Taylor Henry with Acres U.S.A. I hope you enjoy this podcast as much as I enjoy interviewing these folks. If you're serious about regenerative agriculture, I've got an incredible resource you need to check out, the Acres U.S.A. membership. You farm in the physical world, and you deserve a physical printed magazine to match. Since 1971, Acres U.S.A. magazine has been the leading voice in ecological agriculture, delivering the best insights from regenerative farmers, agronomists, and researchers to help you farm profitably without toxic chemicals. Our membership included physical and digital copies of the magazine each month of the year, which has always been a standard for Acres U.S.A., but we wanted to over-deliver on content. When I acquired this business, I was happy to find that we had years of audio files from presentations at our annual EcoAg conference. And guess what? They were hiding. Well, not anymore. We developed this membership portal that gives you access to the recordings from farmers like Gabe Brown, Gary Zimmer, Joel Salatin, and Mark Shepard. We also include recordings of private events. Finally, if you are like me and you like listening to content, we are now producing a membership-only podcast of each issue of the magazine, so you can consume each article while you're out in the field. To make things even sweeter, you'll get discounts on books, workshops, and events to keep expanding your knowledge. So are you ready to take your farming to the next level? Join today for a ridiculously low price at eco-farming.com or see details in the notes. Yeah, that's a good point. I think a lot of people have the idea of making a restaurant on the farm. What are some of the challenges with that? Like, are you guys in a geographical area that you can get foot traffic out there? I know you talked about only being open Thursday through Sunday. Is that because you're in kind of a more rural area?
It's so
Do
rural.
you do?
It's so rural.
Yeah. So that's like a huge challenge probably. So would you say most of the people who are eating at the restaurant are coming from they're coming in like to visit just for that reason?
Well, so I 6 miles away, I have Bandera, and or 7 miles away, and then because my driveway, there's a mile to drive. Even once you get to the ranch, there's a mile to drive into the ranch, and so people have the sense that, oh my goodness, I feel like I'm really like out in the middle of nowhere, and we've now put up more signage and stuff because people are weird. Like so many people will be like, I was worried I was going to get murdered. And I'm like, not like one person has said that to me. Every day someone says that to me, even with the more signs. And I'm like, what is our mind tuned to that we think going out in the middle of the country equals you're going to get murdered? Like it's such a weird thing. But we definitely we're doing a lot of advertising. We have billboards on the main highways near here. We have we're starting at the end of this month at the HEB, which if you're in Texas, you know about, but if you're not in Texas, it's everybody's favorite grocery store here in Texas. We're going to do a buy one, get one entree with the purchase of two beverages for a year on the back of the receipt. Now, I have no idea if this is going to work. In LA, I never would have tried something like that. But a lot of the things that I have thought worked, like buying ads on Facebook and Instagram and all these things, are not as effective out here because of the age demographic. So we are trying direct mailing, billboards. I would have told you billboards are the dumbest investment. I ask every guest that comes in the restaurant right before we started. I said, I don't have a hard stop. I just need to get to the restaurant because I like to greet every guest and explain what we're doing. I ask every guest that I come in contact with, how did you find out? And last week on Sunday, I had 10 guests in a row that said the billboard. So in Los Angeles, I would have told you a billboard is a waste of money. But here, not everybody is on their phones. It's a different culture. Not everybody is looking at their devices or Facebook or Nextdoor or whatever like that. So I do think it's important to diversify, and you do have to really make yourself known when you're super rural. But I believe that, and maybe I'm wrong. And, I've had restaurants in prime locations on Sunset Boulevard and in historic buildings and what people would call an A plus location. And this is definitely like a D negative location, but you're going to drive in one whole mile through the ranch. You're going to look out across a whole valley of fields and see the cows doing the mob grazing, see what that looks like, and then eat your patty melt on sourdough bread that was wild collected yeast from the juniper trees in our forest. And I think that your body feels that coherence and sees what's happening. And I hope that that's a ripple effect that goes out into the world and people get inspired about what I'm doing. But yes, it takes an effort. I'm putting a burden on the consumer to come out here. But I would say we're 50% local guests and 50% people that are driving from San Antonio or Helotes or Birdie, some of the bigger areas around. But it definitely is a destination. And anybody that's trying to do a restaurant on your farm at a destination, I want to remember a couple things. Restaurants in regular locations only pull 10% to the bottom line when they're doing everything perfect. So you don't want to imagine that your restaurant is like a windfall of money coming in, but you have the opportunity to utilize everything that you're making. Like we had so much, what is it called? Oso, like the cuts of the cow's leg with the, like nobody was buying these Oso cuts. And I was like, told my husband, like, I need to change my cut sheet. We just have thousands of oso. But then my husband did this amazing roast beef with the bone, with the um, marrow and the roast oso with mashed potatoes and this salad with fig balsamic with figs from the farm and pears from the farm. And people were like over the top. This is the best roast beef I ever had. So when you have any kind of thing that's not selling, you have the opportunity to do whatever you want and create something. And so we turned something that we could not sell in the store for $14 a pound or whatever it was set at to something that was $25 a plate. You know what I mean? So that is one option, but you don't want to imagine that restaurant is just going to make so much money, but it is amazing because you get to use whatever and everything you have in the same way that CSA is. I think CSA is a great model as long as you don't let the customer choose everything, because it's community supported agriculture means they're supporting you. So you have a lot of eggplant and tomatoes. I had a lady say, I'd like the CSA this week and I want no nightshades. Well, I'm sorry, it's the middle of summertime in Texas. Only nightshades are growing right now.
Yeah.
So,
When you look at like the profitability of a restaurant, the ones that you ran before where you're buying in all the product, do you have more? I mean, obviously, this restaurant isn't doing what you were doing in LA, but is there a little bit better margin there? The fact that you are, buying
I
the
think where
product
the
from
margin
you.
is going to be, if when I get my restaurant up to like full tilt here, the margin is going to be in the rent. The margin is going to be that like I live here, other people live here, the business is here, and so that mortgage, one restaurant would be like what my rent in LA would be, what my whole mortgage is here. But that's partially my husband and I's home. So we're accountable for part of it. The restaurant's accountable for part of it. The brewery's accountable for part of it. And so all of these, I didn't even mention the brewery when we were talking about things on the farm. But, anyways, so that is where I think the major savings is. And so many of the rental structures, at least in my restaurants in California, were based on these percentage rent. And to tell you the truth, when I negotiated my original percentage rent in California, I had no imagining that I would get to $7 million or $6 million a year. And so I thought, well, I'll negotiate that percentage rent doesn't even kick in until $3.5 million, and I don't have to worry about it. Well, sure, that was a great idea until I did 7 million and I'm paying $50,000 a month in rent. That was crazy. You know what I mean? So I think that the one of the major savings will be in the rent, and that there's multiple homesteads, multiple uses for the property, and that is part of it. And then of course, buying when we switched over to regenerative, vegan food is pretty cheap. To be honest, like it's all vegetables. We were buying direct from farmers. We were growing our own vegetables. So vegan food is pretty cheap. But when we switched to the protein, regenerative protein is where the prices just tanked. Like I couldn't. What food cost has to be below 25%, below 30%. If you could get your labor in California, it has to be below 25% because $18 is minimum wage. So it's a little different state to state. But imagine if I'm paying for regenerative, even wholesale, I'm paying $9 and get a pound for regenerative meat from Stimple Creek, or $7 a pound for ground beef from Stimple Creek, which I think is excellent meat. I think what they're doing is great. Force of nature, what they're doing is great. But then you just start to look at, okay, if you're doing a third of a pound burger, and that third, so we're talking about $3 for the burger. So just at 25% cost, okay, well, now we're already at $16 just for the patty. We haven't, not the regenerative bun with Yanni Wang's regenerative grain from Oatman's Flat in Arizona, and then the tomato and the lettuce coming from Ayala Farms in Ventura. You start to get stack that, and can you get people to pay $35 for a burger and fries? And that's where it came in. So with the meat thing, I'm not paying anywhere near that when I'm using my own cow and they're eating grass. And yes, I buy hay, or feeding the pigs. Sure, we have to buy food for the hogs, but we're selling our bacon either for $19 a pound or we're selling it for $21 at a BLTA with lettuce and stuff. So that's really where the savings is that we are processing these things and not, I mean, we're not, we use a USDA facility, but so I would say there will
I
be
would.
an economics of going up the food chain if I can get to a more higher sales, but that means convincing the guest, the customer, to be willing to come out to the ranch. And that's what I write about a lot, is how can the consumer has so much power, but they have to be willing to stop being a slave to their own convenience, and they have to be willing to do what's right. Like, how do we promote? I want everybody out there, like, let's promote the small farm diet, like not paleo, keto, blah, blah, blah. But like, what percentage of the food you're eating is coming from a small farm around you, a medium farm around you? That's the diet that we need to be promoting. That's what we got to get the consumer to care about, is and be posting on Instagram like, I did this, went and bought my raw milk, I went and got this from the farm, I shook the hand that fed me. Those are the things that we need to have people bragging and boasting about on their Instagram or TikTok feed.
Yeah, it's yeah. No, there's no question. There needs to be like the communications is key. I think where a restaurant would be a big advantage is like you're cooking this stuff, and obviously you're cooking it really well, which is part of the food tasting good. Is there a lot of people that like leave and they're like, "Wow, that was the best steak or best burger I've ever had," and then just walk over to your store and buy the meat?
Yes. And then there's people like, I have one family that comes every weekend. They actually went to your thing in northern Texas, the workshop that you had, or the conference. But they come every weekend, and they have been on a budget for some reasons in their own life. So they haven't been buying food, but now they used to come out every weekend and buy lunch and then do their grocery shopping for the week. They're still coming out and doing their grocery shopping. They're just not buying the meal right now because they're doing that. But they started out just coming to eat. I also want to say I highly recommend having a lot of stuff for kids. If you're going to be a destination and it's going to be far away, we have the yurt, which is has a AC, and we have a ton of board games. So when it's very hot outside, we have the kids zone, which has the table football, table soccer, and then it has a bunch of board games like Mousetrap and blah 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 blah. It has some couches, and it's just like toys, tons of toys that my kids don't play with anymore. And often it's kind of a mess, and it's a little embarrassing, but really the kids don't care. It's right across from the patio, and the parents are just happy that their kids are right there and they can sit and have a beer. And we have the playground if it's warm out, and we have the slack line, and then we have a bounce house. And people say, oh, the bounce house is plastic. Like, it is, but kids love a bounce house. I don't know what it is about a bounce house, but even my kids, we own a bounce house. Like, much of the year it's out and up and blowing. When it's very rainy or cold and windy, we put it away. And my kids are still like, can we go to the bounce house? And they have access to it all the time. So I think it's important to have these kind of things where a parent can just have a moment to scroll on their phone or drink a beer or talk to their husband about issues that have been going on, that they don't ever have a moment. And so we've created where we have the kid zone in the yurt, we have the playground, we have the slack line, and we have the field games. So we have like Beersby and cornhole and horseshoes, and then the bounce house, and we have picnic tables and different nooks and places that people can be and watch their kids. And I think that that's appealing to people. I have local people that are like, drive their kids out here, they take their nap, I see them sitting in the parking lot waiting for their kids to wake up, and then they come, the kids play, and maybe they only buy two popsicles in the store and the mom gets a lemonade or coffee, a latte. But I think that's good. I think it's good that we have those reoccurring customers, because even if it's just two popsicles and a latte, and that's $18, $18, $18, that adds up over time.
Yeah. No, I think it's To create the destination is the model that you're using. How do you like the fact that you actually live on site? Because this is my problem with our place. Because it easily could be a, wedding venue, but I just will not have a wedding venue at the place that I'm living.
Um,
Do people respect? Do you have like a long driveway with a gate for your house?
No, I mean, the brewery and my house are right next to each other. And the wedding, like the room that we do baby showers and weddings and stuff. Well, we have a couple options, but one of the main venue spaces that we have is in the brewery. And my podcast studio is also in the building. So I have a sewing room and craft room, and then my podcast room is here, and then right behind me is the brewery. And so I I don't mind it. My husband does, but basically he was like, as long as my house is off limits, that you're not inviting people to come sit on the porch and like drink tea and talk to you about, like, if you're gonna visit with people, it's not here, and that I know I can come out in my underwear and sit on my front porch, then I don't mind. And so the way our house faces, like, we enter through the what is considered the back door, but the front porch of our house, it doesn't face it's a bad design, honestly. There's no way to even barely get to it, but there's no walkway, like way to walk up to it. So we have this huge wraparound porch, and we have a very private front of our house that looks out on the whole ranch and looks out on the pond. And so my husband can just go out there and sit in his rocking chair in his underwear if he wants, and there's no chance that someone is going to accidentally walk around. And the way we place the solar setup makes it even more like, it doesn't seem like you want to walk that way. But
Yeah.
so it doesn't, the deal with my husband was he just wanted his house to be fully off limits. Like, there was one time that I offered to rent out the main living area of our house for, we had multiple things happening at the same time and they needed another space. And he was like, no, absolutely. Like, no, we're not doing that.
No.
And so I don't mind living on site. And as someone who, I want to tell you, like, from another perspective, is I drove an hour and 20 minutes to my restaurants every day. I worked long hours. I brought children with me, or I left them home for long hours. And I vacillated between the two. I'd either bring a nanny with me and have her, we set up a bed and like a playroom in my offices at one of my restaurant, next to one of my restaurants. And so days that I would be at that restaurant, I would bring the kids with me. On days I was going to the other restaurants, I'd only bring the baby. Then I need two nannies, someone to stay home with the kids. And so this model, honestly, I'm so grateful. If my kids fall and scrape their knee, I'm a radio call away. Like, Molly, your kid fell. His soul's crying. He needs you. And I can be there, hold him, co-regulate his breathing, and then go back to work 10 minutes later. You know what I mean? And so that is really a blessing. My kids can come down. Our newest thing is, if you want toys, you have to do something for them. So people, what can we pick? Mommy, I need $7 to buy this Pokemon card. Okay, well, this needs to be harvested, this needs to be harvested, this needs to be harvested. What do you want to do? This is $5, this is $6, this is $2, or whatever. And then so they get to participate, and they're getting interested. My 10-year-old and my 8-year-old ask, like, so we haven't paid for our house. The bank owns our house, but we own our house. Why do we have to pay the bank every month? Like, how much do we pay the bank every month? They're getting interested about these questions. How much does this car cost? How much would it cost if we bought it all at one time? How much does it cost if we pay it every month? How many months do you have to pay that amount? What is the difference between those two amounts? That, I think, is important education that I don't actually think I got in traditional school.
Yeah, for sure. Well,
And
for sure.
so I feel grateful that they're part of, we're talking about getting meat rabbits right now, and they're discussing how much they're like, well, we think we could feed the rabbits with just grass. We think we could go cut the grass and we wouldn't have to buy hay for them. And I think there's enough grass. And then they were thinking, well, if four rabbits can make the same amount of meat as a cow in a year, they were like doing the math. And they're like, well, we're not going to kill it. So we have to pay daddy to kill it. So, and skin it. And then we have to buy vacuum seal bags. And they're like discussing if a meat rabbit thing is a good thing for them. because they're on this thing that if they start a business now, then they can be millionaires by the time they're mommy's age. And I said, well, you can be millionaires way before your mommy's age if you start now. And I said, I don't know if Meat Rabbits is the $1 million business, but it's a start. So I think that that is a really good and important way for them to be participating. They rig up customers in the restaurant, they make change, they bus tables, they wipe tables, they set tables for catering, set tables for weddings. And I think that's all important education.
Yeah, that's a legitimate investment into your next generation.
And last night, my son is standing naked about to get in the shower, and he's just staring off. I said, "What are you thinking about?" And he said, "Well, I know a lot about how my wedding's going to be. I want it to be here at the farm, and I want to build a house here on the farm. I want to live here and help you and Daddy and not go away. But I just don't even know who I'm going to marry." And I was like, "Well, you're 10, so that's okay." But
You got time,
you
buddy.
got time. And he's like thinking, he's like, well, I would like to have like a lab. I would like to invent things to make plants grow faster. And I was like, great, But so he's having all these thoughts. And whether he becomes some sort of soil scientist or not is not really relevant. The fact that he's interested in it now, we're getting him the microscope, we're letting him do look into stuff. I think that it's important. And I think it's so, I didn't like school. I felt like school was like, you're just like all these hours, and how much of it really sunk in and what did we really learn? So much of what I learned was my parents were entrepreneurs. We had an on-farm business. My mom was a fashion designer, started selling dresses at the farmers market, and she became a huge fashion designer and sold their business for a lot of money when I was in a college. And so I think so much of what I learned was going to trade shows, going to crafts, early on going to craft fairs, later going to trade shows, setting up trade shows at the Jacob Javits Center, printing flyers, flying to other states, like packing orders, weekends, like, oh, we have all these orders, like the family's going to pack orders for the weekend. And so I think that gave me a skill set where I don't operate like this is family time, this is work time, this is like it was all integrated in my life. Actually, family time was mostly work time, but it was still family time and it was awesome. And we all did
Yeah.
these things together. And I hope that I can create that for my family.
Yeah, and I think it's important too because like you're setting the example for your kids that like this is the level that we're at, and your goal always is that next generation just assumes like, well, this is the level like mom and dad were at, so like this is our bare minimum that we have to be, and that their creativity is gonna like somehow scale it up, and they'll think of another way to be better than their parents.
Yeah. And
I mean that's my goal.
that's my goal too. And they're already thinking of stuff. Like everybody always tells Rio how beautiful his hair is. And he was learning about something on YouTube, and he learned about uh, rosemary being good for your hair. So he made an apricot kernel, olive oil, rosemary from the farm, infused oil that you put on your hair. He puts it on his hair, and then his hair is like down to his butt, and he sells it in the store as his little entrepreneurial project. And originally I was like giving him the money, and he was like, "Oh no, that's my part for what I'm doing for the farm. So, this is my part for the farm." And so I just think that this is beautiful to see them, you know, figuring these things out. And even when we've been in tight times, my kids have come to me with their savings and been like, and not that their savings is going to help me $90 or $250 that they have in there, but they've always been, hey, I have a lot of money. I could give it to the farm. Can this help? And I just think that that in itself, being together, being like we're all in this together, is an important aspect to have your kids looking at the world through.
Yeah, for sure. Well, let's talk a little bit about the book. What kind of led you to wanting to write a book? You obviously have an incredible background and story, and then what are some of the things that you talk about in the book and what people will get out of it?
So I before COVID or anything, I had had this awakening around veganism, and I go deep into it in the book about how it just doesn't exist. How I was believed that veganism was the pathway forward for humanity. It was the best thing we could do for the planet. And then I come to be on a farm and I realize there is no vegan food. Nothing is vegan. Everything, death, there is no food without death. And death is the other side of the coin of life. And there's no way to avoid it. And just by saying, I'm not going to eat a lamb chop or I'm not going to eat a steak doesn't stop death. And when I had that realization, it kind of broke my brain open and to something that was like such a hard held belief. And as COVID happened and as politics got more and more like extreme and separate from each other, I just started to say, like, I don't know what the truth is, but I suspect that nature does. And I just started looking at the farm, just as any farmer does. We observe, we're constantly observing, hey, we did this and this was better. Oh, we put carbon down and that was better. Oh, I would have thought it needed nitrogen, but somehow that was, we're always observing and seeing what is working and what's not working. And through that observation, I was able to just discern that so many ideas that we have in our society are inaccurate. They are not part of God's design and they are a falsehood. And so as I was looking at that, I just started thinking about it and talking about it. And I had started the idea, the outline for this book. And I think it was the original idea was like nature never lies, I think. And when I had my podcast with you, I said, well, yeah, I have like an outline of 7 chapters. Do you want me to send it over and see if you're interested? But we expanded that to 19 chapters and they're not just like really left or right. And I don't want people to think like when I say nature is conservative, what I mean is that nature is like rah rah Trump Vance. That's not what I mean. I mean that it takes care of itself, that it's always self healing, always self regulating. And it asks us to be true to our innate nature, like who we are. And so, I look at breastfeeding, which is a non-political issue. We breastfeed for less than 3 months is the average in this country, and no other mammal is self-selecting for not breastfeeding for much longer than that, even mammals that live much shorter than we do. And co-sleeping, sleeping with the baby in 2 rooms down, like these are non-political issues, but they don't exist in nature. Sometimes bovines sleep far away from their baby for the first couple of nights before they have the smell because they don't want predators to be able to smell them until they can run. And so, but other than that, it doesn't exist like sleeping far away from your offspring. So I just start to look at things. And then, yes, I look at all these different things from abortion to gender. And I'm not in a judgmental way. I'm just saying, does this exist in nature or does it not? And I look at race, I look at equity, diversity, and inclusion, and what is true diversity? What does that really mean? And nature has the most extraordinary uh, example of that for us. I look at body positivity. I look at all of these ideas and ask, is this natural? Does this happen in the natural world? And that
What got you, because were you a religious person before?
I've always had God in my life. Like my parents were more spiritual, I'd say, than religious, but prayer and God was at the forefront of of my upbringing. We were always very mindful of being grateful for God, thanking God, being in a practice of gratitude. But it wasn't tethered to church, I would say. But I did have a lot of um, upbringing in that. But being in nature, being back on the farm like I was as a child, had me have such a profound and grateful experience for the perfection and the design, and that divine intelligence is so much smarter than AI ever will be. And we think of a garden as low tech and we think of the solar panel as high tech. But the solar panel has waste, it has abuse, it has garbage at the end, it has extraction. And the garden is perfect and will be there as long as you tend to it and will disappear into nothing when you don't tend to it. And so it has no negative impact. It recycles everything. There's no waste. And so that's really the high tech. God is the high tech, and what we are creating is low tech. And we could use these tools in conjunction to make our lives easier, but that doesn't mean that they're better than God's design. We're better when we use these tools in partnership with this design rather than to dominate it.
Yeah, and I know
And
you talk a lot about I know you talk a lot about family in the book as well. What sort of things are folks going to get out of your family lessons that you've learned. I mean, just living in think about like your kids' lifestyle when you're in LA to now. I mean, it's a night and day difference. It has to be.
yes, but even, yeah, for sure, it's a night and day difference. But I was living on a farm since 2018 in LA. I moved to Ventura. But through my awakening, which started with the vegan thing and went through all these other things, I had to come to terms with the feminist ideology that I was raised to believe was the most important kind of candle to hold for women wasn't really serving me. Had me be 36 years old, unmarried with no children, and there was a good chance that that's how I was going to end up. I used to just go through life working so hard, being that hustler, being that, I can get it done. And I used to have this little song I would sing in my head. I'd go into a meeting and it's all men, and I'd just be like, I can do anything, he can do better. And I would just think that in my head. But that's ridiculous. Like, I went back to work 5 days after having a baby to prove that I'm as strong as the men. But the reality is, no man can push a baby out of their vagina or grow it for 9 months. And so the fact that I was pushing my poor body and my poor infant to go back to work to prove something is ridiculous, is not honoring my place. And I have a place, and my husband has a place. And I had gotten that twisted in the world I lived in, and I didn't respect masculinity. I didn't respect femininity. I didn't respect that we are two halves that make something better. And do I still struggle with it sometimes? Yes, but I've mostly shed this feminist ideology that could have very easily left me alone without children with some cats living in a I don't know where I lived, a golf course in Granada Hills in Los Angeles. Like that could have been, and I could have went through man after man, and then as soon as they did what I didn't like, well, I don't need this, I don't need him, I don't need anything, I have my own money, I have my own house, I'm my own man. But God had a different plan for me. And the circumstances, which we get into in the book, are very interesting, had me in a circumstance where I believed that I was to choose something as far as marriage that I never would have chose. And in that choice, 13 years later, 4 biological children and 1 adopted child, and all this love that we built, the trajectory I was on, that was not possible for me. I always had one foot out of the door with any man, any little talking to me sideways, any little I was not going to put up with that. There's so much of that in our society. Like, you don't need to put up with that. But that's crazy. Like, what does that mean? Like, what we're teaching our young women is not how to be a good wife and how to be a good mother. And even the statement, no matter where you find yourself on the abortion issue, my body, my choice. I talk about this in the book. To be a mother and to be a wife to your husband is surrendering your body to the comments of your family. And when we tell girls this from a young age, we're actually not setting them up for the level of surrender and obedience that is going to be necessary to take on that role in the way that God has designed us to do so. And so I'm just incredibly grateful that my journey of life showed me a different way, and I listened to the whispers, and I was way out on the skinny branches and followed what I believed I was being asked to do in radical faith. And the rewards that I get to reap are just this extraordinary family, an amazing man. And that wasn't the probable almost certain future for me. I was going to be 42 and desperate and maybe had enough money to do in vitro or whatever, but I was not
Was
on this trajectory.
was it having your first child that you like just felt something inside you, like you it just changed you?
It was, it was cumulative. I had an experience, which I talk about in the book, about feeling like God came to me and told me that two abortions I had in my early 20s, that they were wrong and they were not my choice to make. And I had these like terrible visions of blood and vacuums and babies and the tapestry of life, and every vacuum was changing the whole tapestry, and everything was getting pulled and switched, and everything, the whole world is changing every person you pull out of it. And I had made a promise to God in my early 30s that I would never have an abortion, and I got pregnant on a one night stand with my husband. Not proud of that or anything, but he and we got married because I had been told under no uncircum terms that mother, father, child was the Holy Trinity, and that I was never to do that again. And he didn't speak English. He was undocumented. He was 13 years younger than me. Everything, I never would have seen him. I never would have chose him like intentionally. It was all these circumstances, which I talk about in the book, that led to that one night where that thing happened. And then we got married 2 weeks. Well, I found out I was pregnant 2 weeks later. We got married 3 weeks later after that. I found out because I knew. And I didn't know what I was doing. I just knew that when you know that something is wrong, that it's against God, and you do it, then the punishment is great. If you don't know something's against God, then I don't think there's any punishment. And I think that this is true. You see farmers who come to the awakening about chemicals and stuff, and then they want to make the change and they don't, and then you see like things bad happen, and you're like, oh God, they knew when they didn't know it was going along fine, and then they knew, and you see, and I knew I'd had experiences where I knew something was wrong and I did it anyways, and the karma was swift, and so I knew I just had to marry this person. We didn't speak any of the same language. It was just like crazy, but I knew what I had to do, and I did it. And then we lost the baby 4 months later. And I thought, what is going on, God? Um, but we decided to stick it out. And it wasn't overnight. It wasn't just in the first child. It was all of these things cumulatively adding up to surrendering. And it took a lot for me to surrender. Just getting my husband a plate. Like, why is that? Like, I was just like, you get your own fucking plate. Like, that was my attitude. And so just to like, oh, let me bring my husband coffee every morning in bed. Like, let me get up earlier than him, even though he gets up earlier. Let me like get up at 4:30 and bring him coffee at 5 a.m. Like, it's not that hard to be of service. It's not that hard to surrender. And what he gives to the family, what every man gives to the family, what they're shouldering, what it is to be a man in our society right now. I don't feel like we have a lot of compassion for that. And it was so many things cumulative. Even when the Me Too movement was happening, I remember being very afraid. I had a young baby son, and thinking this is not good. Like, we're just like, I believe women. Like, do women lie less than men? Like, what is going on right now? And I remember feeling these different kind of cumulative things that added up to me shifting my view. And I think that we also have the power. Women have been made to think that we're the victims, and we're not. Like, I was sexually assaulted. It was terrible. But did I want to ruin someone's life with the Me Too movement? No. And do I carry that like trauma every day? No, I don't. I actually can have compassion for that man for what it was to be the age he was, recently rich, recently famous, coming into power and thinking that everything that he wanted was his for the taking. I can have compassion for that moment, and I would not want his whole life to be ruined because of that. But I do carry that with me in the way I raise my sons and the way I let them understand how they are to interact with women. But I don't carry it like I'm somehow hurt forever from it.
Well, there's a peek into some of the amazing stories in the book. That was incredible, Molly. What's your final pitch to people to buy your book?
Well, go out and buy my book because it's awesome. And I'm so grateful that God chose me to have these stories come through. And I think it's very accessible and palatable. And the ultimate reminder in the book for every single one of us, there's been this underlying theme in the green movement and in the alternative energy movement that's been teaching us all that we are a plague, we are a pestilence, we are the problem on the planet. And we are not. We belong here. We have dominion. We are the keystone species, and we have the power to interact with nature and be extraordinary. And I want everybody to walk out of their door every day like, I belong here. How can I be the best cell in the body? And right now, there's an underlying feeling in the whole environmentalism movement that has us feel like bad and wrong. And maybe it's okay if we all get sterilized and can't reproduce because we're destroying everything. And that's not true. We belong here and we have forgotten our role. And I just want everybody to be reminded of that. And so this book is not about me and my story, but about each of us re-remembering how we belong here. And that's my invitation to all of us, that you walk out every day remembering that you were created in God's image and you belong here. And how can you be the best cell in the body of this earth in this time where it is not only a battle for clean food and clean water, but it's a spiritual battle. And we need all of you to be in it with us.
Make sure to go to debunkedbynature.com and pick up a copy of this book. It won't have this gray line on it, but
I haven't even
it,
had it. I haven't even been able to hold a book. You are getting to
I
hold it
know
before me.
so pre-orders are available right now, and then we're hoping everything gets shipped out September 26th. Molly's also having a conference. You want to talk a little bit about the conference you guys are having at the end of September?
Yep. You can use Acres 10 and get 10% off. It's called Food is Medicine. And so we're going to have amazing people. Everybody here, I'm sure, knows about Will Harris. So Will Harris is our keynote speaker. We're having Dr. Ben Edwards, who's an amazing doctor who shifted from, having a small practice in rural Texas to really understanding the power of food as medicine. We're going to have Courtney Swan, who has the largest food and wellness podcast. We're having Alex Zek from The Way Forward, Misha Tate, uh, who is a UFC fighter who figured out healing after fights with nutrient dense food. So it's all about how to cure yourself. And then we're having all these policy people. So if you're interested in learning how to bring bills in your own state, learning how to lobby in your own state, we're going to have a bunch of policy people as well, like Aaron Martin, who brought the Food is Medicine Act in Oklahoma, and many different people, Kelly Ryerson, who's also known as Glyphosate Girl. So, and then we're going to have a book release party on Saturday night. So we want to invite you to come, buy a 3-day pass for the weekend, enjoy all of that stuff. And then in between all those speakers, we're going to have workshops, butchering, sourdough bread, tincture making, and bone broth making. So there's going to be practical skills. There's going to be farm experiences as well. And that is going to be the last weekend in September, 26, 27, 28. And Acres 10 gets you 10% off. And we would love to have you. There's still a few tiny houses left, and there's plenty of glamping. So you can stay on the ranch or you can stay in town at the Best Western. We have shuttles. We'll pick you up at the airport. Or if you're local in Texas, you can drive yourself.
Awesome. That sounds like a great event. Mollie's also going to be at our EcoA conference in December. We'll have links for everything under these show notes. And again, Mollie, thank you for joining us. Always an incredible time talking to you, amazing stories, and please take a few moments, check out her book. That's one thing about the book too. It's a quick read. You'll be able to get through it pretty quickly.
Yeah, some people told me they read it like they had a long flight and they read the whole thing. So, and other people are saying like 2, 3 days they're getting through it. And some people have gone back and read it a second time because they wanted to get more out of it. So, please check it out and also look us up, sovereigntyranch.com, if you're in Texas or you just want to order my beautiful tallow balm for your skin or some meat or anything. Look up sovereigntyranch.com and check us out.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Mollie.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Acres USA podcast, a podcast production of Acres USA. Find us on Spotify, Apple, Google Play, and other popular podcast platforms. Acres USA is North America's oldest publisher on production-scale organic and regenerative farming. For more than 50 years, our mission has been to help farmers, ranchers, and market gardeners grow food profitably, regeneratively, and with nature in mind. Find our books and other Acres USA media and learn about Acres USA events at acresusa.com. Read our online magazine at members.acresusa.com, and we'd like to thank Acres USA staff for their contributions to producing this podcast. This episode was edited and engineered by Weston Larson of Acres USA. We're grateful to our guests for taking the time to talk with us about their experiences.